At 3,600 meters above sea level, your lungs start failing before the game even begins. Players don't just run out of stamina here, they run out of oxygen. Shots move faster, passes behave differently. Even the human body starts to break down. And yet, in the middle of all this, sits a full-sized football stadium where international matches are played like it's completely normal. So the real question isn't how they built it. It's why anyone agreed to play here in the first place. At 3,600 meters above sea level, even standing still feels like exercise. Now imagine running, now imagine sprinting, chasing a ball, while thousands of people watch. That's what happens every time a match is played at Estadio Hernando Siles, the highest professional football stadium on earth. But this stadium wasn't built here by accident. It exists because of a problem that most countries never have to think about. Bolivia doesn't have flat land. La Paz, the country's administrative capital, is carved into a massive bowl in the Andes Mountains. The city doesn't spread outward, it climbs upward. Streets tilt, buildings stack. Entire neighborhoods hang on steep slopes, like they're defying gravity. So when Bolivia needed a national stadium in the early 20th century, there wasn't an open plain waiting to be used. There was only one option: build where the city already exists, even if that means building in thin air. And that decision changed everything. Because at this altitude, physics starts behaving differently. The air is thinner. There's about 30% less oxygen compared to sea level, which means the moment visiting players step onto the pitch, their bodies begin to struggle. Breathing becomes shallow, muscles fatigue faster, reaction times slow down. It's not just a football match anymore, it's survival, disguised as sport. But here's where it gets interesting. For the local players, this isn't a disadvantage, it's the opposite. They've trained here their entire lives, their bodies have adapted, their lungs work differently, their blood carries oxygen more efficiently. So while visiting teams are gasping for air, the home team is just getting started. And suddenly, this stadium isn't just a venue, it's a weapon. A natural advantage so powerful that it sparked international controversy. Teams complained, officials debated, scientists got involved. At one point, global football authorities even tried to shut it down completely, not because of the structure, but because of the altitude itself, which raises a bigger question. If this place gives such an extreme advantage, why hasn't anyone changed it? Why not move the matches somewhere lower, somewhere fair? The answer reveals something deeper, because this isn't just about football. It's about identity, about geography, about a country that refuses to reshape itself just to fit the rules of a global sport. And once you understand that, you start to see this stadium differently. It's not just the highest stadium on earth. It's one of the most strategically powerful locations in all of sports. But altitude alone doesn't explain everything, because building a stadium here wasn't the hardest part. Keeping it functional, that's where the real engineering challenge begins. At this height, football stops being just a game. It becomes a biological test, because at 3,600 meters, your body isn't operating normally. The moment players arrive in La Paz, their oxygen levels drop almost instantly, and the effects are brutal. Headaches, dizziness, heavy legs. Even simple movements feel harder. Now add sprinting, tackling, and 90 minutes of constant motion. This is where things start to break. Visiting players often gas out within minutes. Their lungs can't pull in enough oxygen. Their muscles fill with fatigue faster than they can recover. Some teams have reported players needing oxygen tanks on the sidelines, just to finish the match. But it doesn't stop there, because altitude doesn't just affect the body. It changes the game itself. The air is thinner, which means less resistance, so the ball travels faster. Shots don't dip the same way. Long passes overshoot. Goalkeepers misjudge distance. What works at sea level suddenly doesn't work here. It's like playing the same sport in a different set of physics. And that's what makes this stadium so unpredictable. Because every visiting team walks in thinking they're prepared, until the first 10 minutes hit, and suddenly their strategy collapses. Meanwhile, the home team is still running, still pressing, still breathing normally. which creates a strange imbalance, not just skill versus skill, but adaptation versus survival. And that's exactly why this stadium became one of the most controversial venues in football history. Because at some point, people started asking a dangerous question. Is this still a fair game, or something else entirely? By the early 2000s, the complaints were getting louder. And this time, they weren't coming from fans. They were coming from the world's biggest teams: Brazil, Argentina, European clubs. Players arriving in La Paz were struggling before kickoff even began. Some couldn't finish matches. Others said it felt like their lungs were collapsing mid-game. And suddenly, this wasn't just about football anymore. It was about safety. In 2007, FIFA made a decision that shocked the entire sport. They banned international matches above 2,500 metres. That meant one thing. Estadio Hernando Siles was effectively disqualified overnight. No qualifiers, no international games, no global stage. For Bolivia, this wasn't just a rule change, it was a direct hit to their identity. Because this stadium wasn't an advantage they engineered, it was the reality they were born into, and the reaction was immediate. Protests erupted. Fans filled the streets. Government officials stepped in. Even players joined the fight. Their argument was simple. If countries at sea level can play in heat, humidity, or freezing cold, why is altitude suddenly unfair? Why should geography be regulated? The pressure built fast, and FIFA started to backtrack. First, they raised the limit, then they added exceptions, and eventually, the ban quietly disappeared. International matches returned to La Paz, but the controversy never really left, because the question still lingers. When a stadium changes the human body itself, where do you draw the line between home advantage and something much more extreme? Building a stadium is already complex. Building one at 3,600 metres changes the rules completely. Because up here, it's not just the players struggling, it's the construction itself. At high altitude, air pressure drops, oxygen levels fall, which means workers fatigue faster. Machines don't perform the same. Even concrete behaves differently during curing. Everything takes longer, everything becomes harder, and then there's the terrain. La Paz isn't flat, it's carved into steep mountain slopes, where space is limited and stability is never guaranteed. So engineers had to do something unusual. Instead of building outward, they built into the terrain. The stadium is partially embedded into the natural bowl of the city, using the surrounding allard as structural support. This reduces load stress, but creates another problem. Drainage, because when rain hits at this altitude, water doesn't just flow away neatly, it rushes downhill with force. Without proper systems, the pitch could flood in minutes. The foundations could weaken over time. So beneath the stadium, there's an entire hidden network of drainage channels designed to redirect water safely through the mountain. But even that isn't the biggest challenge. Temperature swings are. Day and night conditions can shift rapidly. Materials expand, contract, shift. Tiny stresses build over years, slowly testing the structure's limits. And yet, despite all this, the stadium continues to operate like any other. Crowds fill the stands. Matches go on, the structure holds. Which makes one thing clear. This isn't just a stadium built at high altitude. It's a system constantly fighting the environment it exists in. And that environment never stops pushing back. By the time the match begins, the game is already tilted. Not on the scoreboard, but inside the body. Because visiting teams don't just arrive at Estadio Hernando Siles and play. They arrive and immediately start losing oxygen. And here's the problem. You can't prepare for this in a few days. True altitude adaptation takes weeks, sometimes months, but international teams don't have that kind of time. So they try shortcuts, arrive hours before kickoff, limit exposure, avoid training sessions, but none of it really works, because the moment the whistle blows, the altitude takes over. Players who are used to controlling the pace suddenly slow down. Midfielders stop pressing, defenders hesitate, and strikers, they miss chances they would normally finish without thinking. Meanwhile, The home team does the opposite. They accelerate late in the game when visiting players are running on empty. Bolivia starts pushing harder. More runs, more pressure, more control. It's not just fitness, it's timing, because altitude doesn't hit all at once. It builds. Minute 10 feels manageable, minute 30 starts to hurt. By minute 70, it's overwhelming. And that's when matches are decided, not by tactics, not by skill, but by who can still function, which creates a pattern that's hard to ignore. Teams that dominate at sea level struggle here. Games that should be predictable become chaotic. And slowly, over time, a reputation forms, not just of a difficult stadium, but of a place where the rules of the game quietly change, where advantage isn't earned during the match. It's built into the location itself, and once teams realise that, they start approaching this stadium very differently, not as a challenge, but as something to survive. In most sports, fairness is simple. Same field, same rules, same conditions. At least, that's the idea. But Estadio Hernando Siles quietly breaks that assumption. Because here, the conditions are never the same. Not because of design, not because of technology, but because of geography. And that changes everything. Because if one team is naturally adapted to an environment and the other isn't, is the competition still equal, or is it something else entirely? This is where the debate becomes uncomfortable, because altitude isn't something you can regulate easily. You can't lower a mountain. You can't standardize oxygen levels across countries. And if you try to remove places like La Paz from international competition, you're not just enforcing fairness, you're erasing identity. Because for Bolivia, this stadium isn't an advantage they created. It's the reality they live in. And that forces a bigger question. What does fair actually mean in global sport? Is it equal conditions for everyone, or equal opportunity to compete, wherever you are? Because if fairness means removing every natural advantage, then where does it stop? Altitude, climate, crowd pressure, every stadium has something. But this one takes it further than any other. And maybe that's the real reason it still exists. Not as a loophole, not as a flaw, but as a reminder. That sport was never meant to be perfectly controlled, that sometimes the environment is part of the game, and in this case, it might be the most powerful player on the field.